Hello and welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your host, Morgan. So, it's been a few days into 2021 at this point. We've got a little bit of feel of this whole early access period, and we've noticed that there are a few bugs, but don't worry, on January 20th, I know that there's a big update coming that will hopefully implement bug fixes as well. So, a little bit, one of the bugs we noticed happened on the 6th, and to make it perfectly clear, I'm not referring to the insurrection that happened in Washington, D.C. There is plenty of reporting on that, and this is a channel that focuses primarily on environmental issues. No, something else happened on the 6th that we're going to talk about right now. And the something else that happened was the opening of the bids and the lease sale for the plots of land in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So let's dig into that, and this is going to be your official Arctic oil drilling update, first one post-lease sale. So let's dig into what exactly happened here, and since we are going to be digging into what I'm sure may be considered a tree hugger, bleeding heart liberal issue, I do hope you grabbed your favorite hot snowflake beverage of choice. I believe that normally it's supposed to be a latte. Today I'm just drinking warm coffee with a little bit of French vanilla creamer, but I at least do have my snowflake mug. So let's get into this. So what exactly happened? On January 6th, the bids for the lease sale were opened. Now, the bids did come in prior to January 6th. That's how these bid sales work, but they are not open till the date of the sale. And they were expecting a massive number of bids from oil companies just waiting to sink their drills into that untapped well beneath the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And that's not exactly what they got. They got 3 bids. One of which was from the state of Alaska, from the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, and the other 2 were just some smaller companies. One being Regenerate Alaska, which is a subsidiary of 88 Energy, an Australia-based company, and the other being the Knik Arms Service, which is a small Alaskan company. And the big point that we need to make right here when we're talking about who did the bidding, no large oil companies bid. They were all small companies and the state of Alaska itself. And we'll get a little bit into why Alaska bid in the first place in a few minutes here. But remember, big oil companies like BP did not bid. And that begs the question of why. Why wouldn't they bid? Why would they be uninterested? And we will talk a little bit about that at the end. So, since there were only 3 bids, half of the offered leases, so half of the offered plots of land, got absolutely no bids at all. And it only generated $14.4 million in bids. So while $14.4 million may seem like a big number, we have to keep in mind here that they were expecting a lot more money. They were expecting a lot more interest. And most of this money that was generated came from the Alaska Industrial Development Export Authority. So it came from the state of Alaska. It did not come from the 2 companies that bid. And keep in mind, half of this money goes to the federal government and half of it goes back to the state. So essentially, the state of Alaska paid itself for its own bid sale. And there are officials from the BLM and from the Trump administration saying that this sale was a massive success. But was it really? I mean, you didn't get the interest of the large companies, and you only made a very small fraction of the money you were hoping to make from this lease sale. So how exactly was that a massive success? Well, the opponents of this bid sale, the opponents of drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, are basically calling the results of the sale a joke and laughable. And keep in mind here that those plots of land that got no bids, They will not be leased in the sale. There will be absolutely no drilling on them no matter what happens unless another sale takes place. And let's look a little bit now at the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, since they have never owned a federal oil lease prior to this sale. Why the heck would they bid on an oil lease if they've never done that before? Well, the answer here is that Alaskan politicians, including the former governor Frank Murkowski, pushed the state to bid in the sale because of the lack of interest coming from the oil industry, which is interesting because these were the same people pushing for the sale and expecting it to be this massive success and this massive revenue boost for the state of Alaska. Excuse me. And so they had to push the state to bid because they would have only had those two smaller bids, and the pathetic results of the sale would have been even more laughable had the state not bid. But they're saying that they're expecting the state to partner with large companies like BP to actually do the drilling, that the state's not going to manage that themselves. So that begs the question of why would these large companies be interested with the state-owned lease if they didn't care enough to bid on a lease themselves? And that's a question I don't necessarily have an answer to, but it may be answered as we talk about why it's unlikely or why it is likely that these big companies chose not to bid in what was supposed to be such a lucrative bidding war. So, yeah, that's basically where that's at the minute. And keep in mind that these lease sales are not finalized, meaning the bidding is not, the drilling is not going to be starting anytime soon. The leases, while they have been bid on, are not technically signed and passed off to the state of Alaska and the two smaller companies. There's a finalization process that still needs to take place that usually could take up to about 2 months because it includes an antitrust review by the U.S. Department of Justice. But we are expecting to see a push from the Trump administration to rush the process through the next 2 weeks, because while the leases are not finalized, they can be stopped at any point. No money has necessarily changed hands, and the Biden administration, that would be the easiest way for them to nip this whole travesty in the bud here, would be just to stop that finalization of the sale. And so, like I said, we are expecting to see a push from the Trump administration to have this finalization process that should take 2 months scrunched down into a 2-week period. Now, are we actually going to see that happen, since they are in quite a lot of hot water since everything that happened on the 6th with Trump inciting violence and insurrection and all the turmoil that's currently happening at the minute? I don't know. There have been a lot of resignations in the Trump cabinet, and it's unclear if these smaller projects are going to be pushed through like this, or if it's going to be a normal length finalization process that can be axed at any minute post January 20th. We just don't know here. But even if the sales are finalized, there's still going to be a lot of pushback, and it doesn't mean that the drilling is going to take place. There are still ways to stop this from happening. There are still ways to stop this disgusting rape of a pristine environment. Because there are opponents in Congress, like the U.S. Representative Jared Huffman, who's a Democrat from California, that vehemently oppose the drilling and plan to push for permanent protection for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, meaning that this oil drilling would never be allowed to take place regardless of the sales. And the permanent protection push is likely to have support from the Biden administration. That Biden has already come out and said that they support that. And his appointee to lead the Department of Interior also opposes the drilling, publicly opposes it. And since Democrats now control both the House and the Senate since the Georgia elections at the beginning of the month, any legislation to push that permanent protection and stop this drilling before it begins has a very good chance of being pushed through and actually enacted. But these same legislators want to emphasize that they are still open to plans that allow the native people that do live on the refuge to have access to that oil if they so choose. There are like some questions about that, saying that if anyone is going to do that, it should be them. And to my knowledge, most Alaskan natives oppose the drilling as well. So that's probably more of a symbolic offer than anything else. But again, I haven't looked into that part as much because the issue at hand here are the companies that bought the leases and the state of Alaska buying the lease or attempting to. Again, the sales are not finalized yet. But a big point here is that these legislators that want to prevent the drilling also want to help put people on a path to sustainable economic development. Now, I don't think they're using sustainable as in we need green, clean, sustainable energy. I think they're using sustainable in a way that says stable economic development, that the economic development continues to happen. And I don't know exactly what that would look like specifically for the Arctic. I'm much more familiar with desert and chaparral and the environmental issues there, but that's what we're looking at there. And it's important to emphasize that they still want to ensure this sustainable economic development for the people of Alaska, because we have people like the retired BP executive and longtime lobbyist Roger Herrera, that was one of the people lobbying for this opening of the Arctic Wildlife Refuge to the drilling. He's hugely disappointed at the results of the sale, despite officials saying it was a massive success. And he claims that Alaska is a natural resource state and will have basically nothing if they aren't allowed to drill the oil there. I think that being that he is from BP and he is an oil industry lobbyist, that is very disingenuous and that is not accurate, as we do live in a world that is overwhelmingly choosing to move away from fossil fuels and move more towards green, clean energy. That's saying that the state of Alaska has absolutely nothing if they can't drill and destroy the ecosystems and environments there that are already threatened by the existential threat of climate change is a load of gobbledygook for the most part. And he's only looking at things from one angle because Alaska has so much more to offer than some black goo. But I digress. The big update here, the main takeaways are that there were only 3 bids, and despite officials saying that it was a massive success, the sale was laughable at best. And these big oil companies that didn't bid, basically the sentiments from them are that the risks outweigh the possible rewards. First of all, they don't know for sure that it's even going to be profitable to drill for oil there. It's a very difficult place to drill in. It is off the coastal plain. It is in the Arctic where it's hard to get equipment up to. Drilling in marine environments is just very different than drilling on dry land. There's an increased risk for oil spills. And if an oil spill happens in a marine environment, it is much more difficult to clean up. It is much more expensive to get rid of those negative environmental effects of an oil spill in a marine environment than a terrestrial environment. And oftentimes they just put chemicals on the oil to make it sink, which doesn't fix the problem. It just sends it to a different level of the ecosystem. But I digress on that point. So if these oil companies weren't willing to risk all of this for almost and very uncertain reward at best, nothing is guaranteed, why would they pair with the state of Alaska to drill on that plot? It seems unlikely to me that they would take that risk for a lease they don't even own. But if the state of Alaska then accepts any responsibility for any spills or anything and the company gets off scot-free, that might change things. But again, that is speculation. I don't know. So that's likely why these companies didn't bid and why it's unlikely that they would want to partner with the state to drill on that piece. But I mean, anything could happen. Everything is still a bit up in the air, and there's still a chance that the lease sale isn't going to be finalized anyway, and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge will get its permanent protection that the opposition to drilling wants it to have, and that it should absolutely have. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this issue as the story keeps unfolding, so as more information comes, I will give more updates. And this is all we really have right now, but I do hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, evening, what have you, and I will see you all in the next one.
Thank you again for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell if you would like to see more. And if you'd like to follow me on any of my other social medias, the links are down in the description below. Don't forget to check out thereptilegoth.com for all of my articles and blog posts. If you found any value in this video and you would like to help support the channel, please check out my Patreon page. That link is also in the description down below. And a special thanks goes out to my Diamond Dragon patron, Diane B. What you're doing is really helping me fund a dream here. I will see you guys all in the next one.